Welcome back. In this video, we'll talk about choosing the right customer, how many customers are there. And when you generate ideas, we already talked about the pain, and the pain is obviously related to a very specific customer. And you have to start with that specific customer. If you remember when I told you earlier or last week, I told you that the foundation for a great idea or for a great business is to have a unique product or service that offers unique value to a unique customer. So your ability to have that unique customer, to identify that unique customer, is really, really critical to have a successful business. So we start with a very specific customer, not a generic customer. We start with we ideate, we generate ideas always with the customer in mind, and that solution that we create is specifically good for that customer. I'll give you an example. I'm left-handed. 10% of the population is left-handed. If I focus on left-handed people, my solution for them is going to be uniquely good for them and not for everybody else. I'm not going to take you through the 8 different dimensions that I created for you here separately, and I'm going to take you through them in this table, which once again you will have and you will use to define your specific customer. So dimension number 1, they are like you. 0, give it a 0 if they're nothing like you. The customer is really nothing like you. And the less they are like you, the less you are, or the less likely you are to really understand them. Number 10, they are very much like you. You are actually part of them. So in your case, maybe you're an MBA student. Maybe your customers are MBA students. You really do understand them because you're one of them. They are very much like you. Dimension number 2, you know them very well. 0, you don't know them at all. 10, you know almost all of them literally. Now, your customers might be people, well, hopefully you're not going to be as generic as people between the ages of 25 and 34, because that's a pretty generic demographic definition that I hope you're going to avoid. I hope you're going to focus on something that's unique to them, not just age or income level or geography. And maybe, like the example that I gave you last week of a company called LNK, there are only 200 customers, and you actually know all of them. Now, I'll give you an example. I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. I'm also on the database that's called eSpeakers. I know maybe not all of them, but I have access to all of them through that database and through the National Speakers Association. So that's the closest that I can go to I know almost all of them literally. I would not put it a 10 even for knowing other speakers in my industry, but I would put it pretty high up there. There are enough of them to create a business. You know, for LNK from last week, there are only 200 customers in the world, but it was enough for their size of business. So you have to look at this from the perspective of your size of business. On the flip side, there are enough of them to make profit that you can handle, that you can handle as a business. But there's a flip side to it, and that is there are too many. If there are too many of them, and your definition is pretty much everybody, or everybody ages 25 to 34, there are a lot of people. I mean, we're getting close to 1 billion people on this planet that are between 25 and 34. That's a 0. 10 is when there's something that makes them very unique compared to the rest. So I know I was talking about size, and now I'm saying that there's something unique. But the more unique they are, the smaller the number is. So, and I'll get back to that, trust me, in a later slide in this video. Number 5, you know their pain very well. It's not just that you know them and you know who they are, but you understand their pain. 0, you don't know their pain at all. 10, you're personally experienced with their pain. Now, this is different than number 1 or number 2. Number 1, when they're just like you and you're one of them, that doesn't mean that you know their pain, that you have experienced it firsthand. That would be a 10. Number 6, you have something that they will appreciate more than anyone. 0, you hope that what you have they're going to like, but you don't know that. 10 is you know that once they get their hands on it, they will think that's the best thing since sliced bread, at least for them. Once again, just like I told you when we talked about pain and scoring pain, be pragmatic. If you throw a 10 when you know it maybe shouldn't be more than a 2 or a 3, you're not misleading me. You can still get an A in this class. You're misleading yourself and your investors. Number 7, they are easy to reach. And it's important that they're easy for you to reach because you need them, 1, to interview them. 2, you need them to test your product. 3, you need to be able to sell to them. 4, you need to be able to support them. So if you identify people in Micronesia as your customers and you know them very well and you know you probably are not one of them, but maybe you are, except that you live here in the US and you don't go there pretty frequently, it's going to be hard for you to interview them, to get them to test your products, to sell it to them, and to support them later. So how good is your access? How easy they are to reach? And finally, number 8, are they ready to adopt new technologies? Because what you're offering, or new products or new solutions, because what you're offering obviously is new. If you're offering the same thing they already have, why would anybody switch to buying from you? 0, they're not ready to adopt from you, and they're not ready to adopt something new because once again, you're offering something new. And 10, historically, this group of people shows the tendency to adopt new products or services very early on. So let me emphasize, and before I emphasize on that last point, for there, again, 8 dimensions, every one of them ranks between 0 and 10. You're going to have your own ranking for your own customer, and you're going to add it up, and we're going to see how fit is your customer, how unique is your customer. Okay, I talked about their ability or willingness to adopt early technologies. There is something that's called the product life cycle. And the product life cycle used to be the early adopters, pragmatics or early market, late market, mainstream market, and then finally the skeptics or the laggards. I don't know how accurate it is to say that plus minus 1 standard deviation are the mainstream, early and late mainstream, putting their 34% each, and then anything beyond that is the 16% beyond plus minus 1 standard deviation. But that's typically how we look at things. However, 2 of the books that I recommended to you come from Jeffrey Moore. One of them is called Crossing the Chasm, and the second one, the follow-on, is called Inside the Tornado. In Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore identified an interesting chasm where he said that it's not enough to be able to sell to early adopters to get the mainstream market to buy. I'll talk a little more about the specifics of them. However, one might say, well, if this doesn't help you, then why even start with early adopters? Because you cannot start without early adopters. Mainstream market will not adopt your product first. So there are ways to cross that chasm, which he describes in these 2 books, and I'm not going to get into it. This is outside of the scope of this class. So I'm going to talk about 5 types of customers here, and we're going to start with the innovators. 2.5% of population are considered, for every technology, are considered innovators. And it's important that you know that some people would be innovators in one type of technology, one industry, and complete laggard on another one. So you're focused on where they are in the life cycle of the technology, the service, the industry that you want to serve in. So let's talk about the innovators. The innovators, they buy something simply because it's new. They want to be the first. They don't know what they're going to do with it. Sometimes they even buy before the product is released. Those are the ones who are going to buy on Kickstarter and things like that. I'm going to buy it because it looks really cool. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. They are willing to be your beta testers. Those are very valuable. The second group are the early adopters. They're actually later than the innovators. They're looking for breakthroughs. They're looking for value. They are a lot more pragmatic. They're willing to try new things, but they want to understand how this is going to help them. So they're not buying it just because they're new. They want to buy it because they get something out of it, because the value to price ratio is better for them, and we'll talk about that next week. They are willing to be references. to the mainstream market. Mainstream market starts with what we call the early majority. Those are a lot more pragmatists than the early adopters. You have to win them if you want to enter the mainstream market. Otherwise, you're stuck in and you don't cross that chasm. They're driven by high practicality, not just practicality, high practicality. They want to see references. They're not going to buy without references. They need the support. They will need your support, and they buy from established companies. So it's a little harder for you to sell to them. Again, if you penetrated the early market, then it's easier for you to get there because the early market will be willing to be references, even though early majority, by the way, kind of looks at them with some suspicion. Then we have the late majority. Those are a lot more conservatives, not conservatives in the political context. They are conservative in their buying decisions. They believe a lot more in tradition than in progress. Again, not political. And they wait until something becomes the standard before they start buying it. They will typically buy from the market leader. And finally are the laggards. Those are highly skeptics. They don't want anything new. They don't believe in disruptive products. They focus on the discrepancies between what you promise in your sales and what the actual product does. Eventually, you're going to be selling to them, but initially, you need to focus on those innovators. Those are the ones that you're going to be able to sell to the first for them to see, oh, this is really good for something, and then the early majority. Now, how many customers? How many customers should you be looking for? And I'm using the Goldilocks principle, you'll see. Maybe there's not enough. Not enough customers. It's not going to generate enough revenue. It's not going to justify the operating expenses, and therefore you're not going to see a profit and you're not going to see a return on your investment. And even worse, not for you, but for your investors, is that they're not going to see a return on their investment. You could have too many customers, which means that competitors will enter very, very quickly because, this is big on their radar screen. This is where you're going to start seeing companies like Microsoft and Google and Apple jumping in, and all of a sudden you're going to get squeezed out unless you can protect yourself good enough. Not, again, fool yourself to think that you're protected with a good, sustainable competitive advantage. That's outside the scope of this course. Or it can be just right. This is where the Goldilocks principle comes in. It will generate enough revenue for you. It will justify the operating expenses. It will provide a strong return on investment, both for you and for your investors. It will not attract competitors too early. Remember again that company L&K did not attract competitors. It did get on their radar screen, but it was just too small for all the Agilents and Tektronix and Rohde & Schwarz, the big test equipment companies. It was just too small for them. But it generated enough revenue and profit for them, for Xavier and Johan. It will not attract the competitors. It will not get on Google's radar screen or any of the others. It is scalable enough for you to generate what you want to generate. And the most important thing is it may allow you to enter an adjacent market. So you have delivered one product, you have delivered one service, and then you go into another one. So think about Uber, for example. Uber's first market was, or first industry, was really the cab industry, right? The transportation industry. But once they established themselves there, they moved into something like Uber Eats. And now they're in the food delivery business. It was an adjacent market. It's the same customers, but once they've established themselves, it was easier for them to get there. So one good thing about one thing that you should think about is, can I move to adjacent markets from where I am? That means that maybe the customers I'm focusing on right now, multiplied by my potential revenue from every customer, can grow by either selling more products to the same customers or selling the same products to adjacent customer segments. Now, years ago, I conducted a strategy session for a technology company, and this is kind of what the room looked like where we did our offsite in strategy development, a lot of flip charts and all. But I highlighted one element for you in the markets that we like. That was when we talked about what is it that in the market that we like. And there are all kinds of very industry unique characteristics over there. But the one I want you to look at is that we looked at segments that are between $200 and $500 million. If it was more than $500 million, and I'm not talking 501 or 502, I'm talking about, oh, this market is in the billions, it was too big for us. If the market was less than 200 millions, it was too small for us. So we've actually identified the target size of the market that we're after. And that was one of our criteria to choose a technology that we want to release into that market. Now, how do you know how many are there? And now I'm going to share with you, yes, this is me in that picture. This is one of my hobbies, and that's building and flying radio-controlled airplanes. And at some point I had an idea, kind of for a side business. What I wanted to do is I wanted to to build and sell electric fans for radio-controlled airplanes. So jet radio-controlled airplanes actually use turbines. The turbines cost about $3,000. A few cost less, a few cost more. They're kind of complicated to maintain. They're dangerous. They can start fires, and that often happens. And there is a general trend into electric ducted fans, EDFs. Like the one that you see on the left, the bottom left side. However, the problem with EDFs is that they're hard to integrate, and if you don't associate them with the right exhaust pipe and the right electronics and so on and cooling, you can lose 80% of the efficiency of that fan. You don't want to lose 80% of the efficiency. So I had an idea. I'm going to start a business that integrates them and sells them as complete sets, just like the turbine, which is the one that you see in silver and purple. The thing is, I did not know what is the market size for it. So sometimes you can Google and get the answer. Now with ChatGPT, maybe you can get a better answer, maybe you can get a misleading answer, and that's something to keep in mind as well. What did I do? I realized that my target market are those who are flying jets that currently use turbines, just like the second one from the left. One other thing I realized is that the AMA, the Academy for Model Aeronautics, actually provides insurance to them, but they require to have a very specific turbine waiver. I just called the AMA and I asked, how many turbine waivers are there? Well, they couldn't give me an answer. They couldn't give me an exact answer. And so I asked a more precise question. How many turbine waivers did you issue this year? Well, that was a lot easier because all they had to look for is what is the first number of turbine waiver that they issued, what is the last number of turbine waiver they issued that year, and just subtract the two numbers, and now we know how many new turbine waivers were issued, and that allowed me to project and figure out what the size of the market is. So if you're looking for, let's Google and we're going to find the answer. Google would be great, and ChatGPT would be great in finding more generic answers. Sometimes you can go and reach out to a market study. The problem is that those cost a lot of money, and they're going to do the same things that you can do yourself. If you ask the right questions, ask the right people, you may find answers that may not be direct, but may give you a good enough order of magnitude of how many customers are there. You're going to have to do that for your business. I'll see you on the next video.